This is the 20 Minutes of Influence podcast with your host, Greg Jameson. Influencer marketing is the process of identifying, researching, engaging, and supporting the people who create high-impact conversations with your customers. On each episode, I talk with industry leaders, business rock stars, and internet celebrities who contribute their knowledge about influencing others and growing your influence. Welcome to the 20 Minutes of Influence podcast. I'm your host, Greg Jameson, and I have a very special guest with me today. Many of you will probably recognize his name. It's Armand Morin. And Armand and I actually first met in person, what was it, Armand? 3 years ago now at Ken MacArthur's event?
Yeah, I think it was about 3 years ago, yes.
And I had been following Armand a long time before that, as I'm sure many of the listeners on this podcast have as well, because Armand is an absolute well-known expert in the space of internet marketing. And he has spent pretty much as long doing this as I have, the beginning of the internet till now. But he has some interesting stories in terms of how he actually learned to sell and learned to actually make internet marketing work for people. Today, Armand and I are going to talk a little bit about internet marketing, including podcasts, which we're on here today, and how podcasts can play into the whole role of internet marketing. But at any rate, welcome, Armand. I am super excited that you are joining us here today.
Well, thanks, Greg. Thanks for having me. I think we're going to have a lot of fun and share a lot of interesting things, let's say. How's that?
Sounds great. Go ahead and tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself that I didn't cover there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll keep it really short, but just so those of you that don't know me, don't know what I've done or anything like that, I've actually been online now for 23 years. Kind of strange because I was just thinking as Greg was talking that in 3 years, I will have spent literally half my life on the internet. Is that crazy? I know for kids nowadays, it's not a big deal.
They spent their whole life.
Yeah, I mean, but it's like you got to. I think it's hard for people to understand that there was a time without the internet. And it's really just kind of interesting because I've had actually a business been full time since 1996 online. Throughout that time, we kind of did a lot of things through trial and error and figured out some ways to build a business that was just different because in the beginning, there wasn't any guidance. It was just a matter of trying something, see if it worked, and then went on. And throughout that time, we were fortunate enough to be influential on some of the marketing techniques and strategies and some of the marketing tools that were out there. And we built software companies. We've done seminars. We've done all kinds of crazy things and speaking around the world as well, too. But the great part is that the internet, even though I've been doing this now for 23 years, honestly, in the world of business on the internet, it's still in its infancy in many, many different ways. And I think that's what makes it fun. It makes it interesting, and it makes it always exciting in order to do something new almost every day, really, when you really think about it. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. And I think that's true, is that even as we said, we're going to talk some more here about podcasts in a minute, but that's something that's, it's been around for a few years, but in the last 3 years, yeah, that's one of the things that's really taken off.
Well, what's interesting is, yesterday was a very pivotal moment for podcasting. And the reason is because Apple officially made it so podcasting has its own separate app. So now on a desktop, on your iPhone, on the iPhone and the iPad, it's been there for a while, but it went to the actual desktop system where it's actually now separate. So it has its own dedicated app. So it's really interesting when you really think about it. It's separated, Apple separated movies, it separated the App Store and movies, music, and podcasting into 3 separate applications.
Yeah, and auto manufacturers have started to put podcasts as one of the choices on the little dashboard that you get with modern
Right.
cars too. And it's it's one of those things that's kind of funny because for years as I've been watching TV with my DVR, and I can sit there and I can pause a TV show and rewind it a little bit to see what I missed or whatever. As I'm listening to the radio in the car, for years I've thought, why don't they do
Yeah,
the same thing with a radio as they do with a TV, where you can just,
I know.
I was listening to something and I got interrupted or whatever. I want to just backtrack for a couple of minutes and listen to what I missed. Well, with a podcast, you can do that.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, it's a great thing for podcast itself, to be able to rewind and it's yeah, just like you said, it's like a DVR where you can actually have everything started. I actually watch a lot of television now with YouTube TV, and what's really kind of cool about it is that I can set it to, again, basically save the shows that I want to watch, and then I can watch them at my convenience, rather than having to be there live at the time that the show actually played. And podcasting's pretty much the same way. As your shows come out, they are saved to a location and sometimes automatically downloaded for you, and then you just listen to them again at your convenience in your car and you commute or just sitting around or working, as an example.
Yeah, I've heard it said that podcasting is the audio version of Netflix.
Yeah. Well, that's the interesting part about podcasting right now is there's a major fight in the podcasting industry in order for a company to come out with the first podcasting for Netflix, because you have Apple out there with the Apple Store and with their podcasting platform, but there really isn't any centralized location like a Netflix for podcasting. And so companies right now are spending millions of dollars trying to come out with something and be the first one out there to be this aggregation of all the podcasts in the world. So it's going to be an interesting fight over the course of the next couple of years.
I think it absolutely is, and that's it's something that anybody that's doing business online is going to need to consider. But let's talk some more about that in just a second. I want to backtrack just a little if we can.
Yeah.
So we've got people out there that have offline businesses typically,
Right.
that are the ones that are really trying to, or have been trying to ever since the beginning of the internet, say, hey, I want to play online as well as offline here.
Sure.
Maybe I've got a store, maybe I've got a service, whatever it is, but I want to play in this online space as well. And I'm doing pretty well offline.
Right.
I've done the things that I need to do in terms of getting visibility to my location. I've got some customers and so forth, but I'm having a really struggling to get much of a following on the internet.
Sure.
What suggestions do you have for people?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of times people go on the internet from an offline business either with this massive expectation or they're just not sure of where they should go first. And the first thing that I would tell anyone with an offline business is the first things first, and that is to be found. And what I mean by that is you need your basics in place, such as number one, obviously your website. Number two, a Facebook page. Number three, make sure all your review pages are in place, meaning your Google page, Google for Business page, your Yelp page, any review sites that are out there. Make sure that you have a presence and that you actually control those items. Because if I do a search right now, and I happen to be online, so if I just do a search for dry cleaner, and I'm going to put in where I live in Wake Forest, North Carolina. If I type in dry cleaner, Wake Forest, and see, a couple different things happen. The first listing, and this is why this is so important, is your Google business listing. In other words, if you have your website, your business registered with Google, you could possibly show up there. And there's ways to optimize that. But there's, for example, I see 3 right now. But then there's a listing, and the next 2 listings down are actually Yelp pages. So it's, again, important to be in a place like that in Yelp. And here's another one that's a lot of people don't really know or understand, and that is Angie's List. Angie's List for local businesses is one of those huge things that you need to actually just enter your website in and be there. Another thing that's really easy to help you actually get more, oddly enough, internet sales is actually Groupon. And Groupon is one of those things I've had so many people have success stories with Groupon. It's crazy. But you want to use it kind of like a lead generator. So as an example, I know chiropractors that will do like one free adjustment or a low cost adjustment. Like maybe it's like $29, and they might have 800 people take them up on that offer. And their hope is that, yeah, this is only going to take me a few minutes, but I might get that person coming back again and again and again and again. So don't overlook something as simple as Groupon, because a lot of people don't understand the power of it. But when you start going through the Groupon offers, what you'll be able to see is how many people took advantage of that offer. And you'll be very, very surprised at what they can do for lead generation for almost any kind of business. But again, back to the point is that our basics need to be covered. Facebook, Yelp, Groupon, things of that nature, listing yourself in Google. That will actually get you found. And so that's the first step. The second step is to have a strategy. And what I mean by strategy is a simple strategy, not a paid strategy or anything like that, but it's a very, very simple strategy. And what most people would call this is a social media calendar. And what this is just a matter of being consistent. So each week you might post to a place like, let's say, Facebook, Twitter, possibly even LinkedIn, depending on what you have. You can even make posts to your Google business account, and that will actually show up as well. But each week you decide, on this day, I'm going to post something. Maybe on Tuesday, I'm going to post a little bit of content based upon what I do. And when I say a little bit of content, could be a tip, a strategy, or something that would be of interest to your market. And then maybe on Thursday or Friday, let's say you make an offer or a discount if people come on in on that day or a specific day of the week. And that might be a very, very simplistic social media calendar. Some people will get a little bit more complicated. But the fact is, just by keeping a couple posts per week to these various places, and you don't have to do it yourself, you can hire someone else to do that. But by doing that, that puts you out there and keeps you consistent and keeps you out there. And every little piece that you put out, think of it like a calling card, every little tiny piece. So the question is, how many calling cards do you want out there at this moment? But then also, where a lot of people kind of miss the boat, in my opinion, especially local businesses, is they'll post like pictures of their business. They'll post pictures of, clients, and all that's great. But what would be the best picture for them to post is actually a picture of their coupon that they might use for any other kind of offline advertising. Post that online, because that might get shared. And that coupon, again, going to a local market, could bring in, obviously new clients in a very simplistic fashion. So offline businesses really, again, first of all, need to be found. Number two, have to have a posting strategy online. The third piece is a little bit more complicated. And I'd say the fourth piece, and I'll tell you why I skipped the third. I'll come back to it in a second. But the fourth piece would be a paid advertising strategy. And that's, you may be using Google, maybe using Bing and Yahoo, but that would be a paid strategy. And that would be minimalistic at first to find out who responds and things of that nature. But the third one that I skipped over was actually something that I have a ton of students all over the world doing right now. And it's something that I know you've seen me actually do this live, where I take a keyword phrase and I rank it on YouTube in just a couple seconds. Yeah. And so what we've done is we've actually started teaching people and students how to do this for local businesses. And it's very, very simplistic. The average local business will want to be found for about 200 to 250 keyword phrases. And so what you can do with these local businesses, as an example, if I made a video right now and I ranked it for dry cleaner in Wake Forest, NC, I would probably, currently right now, I would be the only dry cleaner on Google with a video. But what that does for me is it's not so much that I'd be ranked in YouTube, which would be great, but also I would be ranked on the first page of Google. Because what we've discovered on these keyword phrases for local businesses, they're very easy to rank. And number two, we actually get into Google simultaneously. In fact, many times we appear above all the paid listings, sometimes not paid listings, but the organic listings from the maps and things of that nature. We can actually rank above that with a video. So these people are getting this traffic from YouTube, and there's very little work that actually has to be done. So does that make sense?
It does. In fact, it's so interesting that you brought that up, because I have had some clients where we built them some YouTube videos specifically for keyword ranking
Yep.
and search engine placement. And we did this like 7, 8 years ago.
Sure.
And they're still the only one on Google, and therefore still the first place on page 1 of Google because of that video. It's insane.
Exactly. I did this. I had a student contact me the other day, literally just yesterday, actually. And I was answering a question, and I think the phrase, I forget the phrase. The phrase was something like, I think it was cosmetic dentist. Let me see, cosmetic dentist in Kensington, right? Mm-hmm. And it was the UK, of course. But yeah, right here. If you go to Google right now and you type in cosmetic dentist in Kensington, you're going to see that I'm actually the #1 video on that topic, and was just a sample I did in front of an audience one day. and I did that last year.
Yeah, it's crazy that people are still don't get that piece of the puzzle there. Now, the other thing that you talked about here back in step 2, I guess, was putting out all this content on a weekly basis or on a regular basis. And I think that's another thing that so many businesses don't understand. They think, oh, I can put up my website and I can get listed on these different directories and whatnot. And now I'm done. I can sit back and watch the orders roll in.
Right.
And it's like, it doesn't work quite that way. You got to be out there and being in everybody's face by producing these little pieces of content on a consistent basis. One of which, of course, could be a podcast.
Sure.
So,
yeah, I mean, a podcast is a great way for local businesses, especially, and for certain local businesses, I would think it's almost a must, actually.
I think it is too. So we need to take a quick break. And on the other side of the break, let's talk specifically about that, about using podcasts to create your content, promote your content, and I guess become visible. That work for you?
Sounds good.
All right. We'll be right back after this. Hi, I'm Greg Jameson, the host of the 20 Minutes of Influence podcast. Every week, I not only have the opportunity, but the real privilege of interviewing experts in their field, true thought leaders, and I get to share this information with you. The purpose of this is really to help you sell more of your products and services online, which is the core premise of my primary business, Web Stores Limited. At Web Stores, we go out and we create e-commerce websites for small businesses. Plus, we do internet marketing and digital advertising for those businesses to really help them sell more online. We have a whole number of resources and tools designed to help make this process easier for businesses, probably much like yours. I've been the author of several #1 best-selling books, including Amazon's Dirty Little Secrets and The Influencer Effect, plus a whole series of online courses if you want to learn how to do this stuff yourself. The best way to remain in contact with me, besides subscribing to this podcast, of course, is to simply go to gregjameson.com/free gift, where I have a special offer for you simply because you are a valued listener to this podcast. Thanks again, and now let's get back to today's episode. Welcome back to the 20 Minutes of Influence podcast. My guest today is Armand Morin. And right before the break, Armand and I were talking about creating content for businesses and one of those pieces of content being a podcast. So tell me, Armand, how you would see a small business with a physical brick and mortar store. Maybe they're selling, I don't know, whatever kind of widgets in a mom and pop shop. Why would they want a podcast, and what would they talk about? How would they go about doing that?
Yeah, I mean, I think with any kind of business at all, it's a matter of trying to put yourself in front of an audience that is interested in what you have, no matter what it is. And so what a podcast would do and what they would talk about is basically about their products, their services. They could do product reviews. I mean, one of the most popular things on the whole internet is what they call unboxings. And on YouTube, especially, if you type in unboxing videos on YouTube, shocked. You'll be amazed at what it is. You could do that with new products coming in. I don't care what kind of product it is, but you can get the product in, open up one and just tell everyone about your experience. Now, you could do this via audio, kind of like what we're doing right now. Or if it's a visual type of item, then what you would do is you could do a video podcast and you could put that out every week. And that would be very, very simple to do. In fact, what you can do and to make your life easier is there's two types of podcasts out there. There are video podcasts, like I said, there's audio podcasts. But if you do a video podcast, you can always extract the audio from it. And then you can also take that video and you can put it on YouTube. And then you can take the audio and you can transcribe it and you can use that for Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and things of that nature, and on your own blog as well too. But again, talking about your own products and services, what that allows you to do is kind of giving yourself a commercial. So think about this. Many people, if they have a local business, they might be buying radio commercials as an example. I mean, if I was a local business, I probably would buy radio commercials in some way, shape, or form. And the reason is because radio commercials actually still do work. On a local basis, depending on my market, I might buy that. But think about a podcast like your own infomercial every day, every week, however often that you want to do it. But it's a chance for people to get to know who you are. It's building that relationship with your audience. It's also a chance to talk about your products, your services. And depending on what your business actually is, it might be a chance to teach, train, educate your market as to why they might need your products or services, or why your product and services are maybe better than someone else's out there. So again, this gives you time to do that, and it gives you space where, for example, in a radio, I'm just going to use a radio commercial because most people have heard it, is in a radio commercial, you might have 30 seconds or 1 minute, and you have to talk a mile a minute and try to get everything in, and hopefully people understood you at the other end. But in a podcast, you can talk leisurely. You can talk at your pace. You don't have to feel rushed, and there's nothing wrong and there's nothing right necessarily to say. And what you're doing is you're having this open-ended conversation. And I think probably the most strangest thing that you'll experience is that first time that you do a podcast, especially if you're by yourself and you're not talking to someone, and you're just talking randomly by yourself in a room. I mean, it seems kind of crazy at first, and because the whole time you're thinking to yourself, this feels kind of strange because I'm talking to myself out loud. But you get used to it. You get used to it and you get better at it. And the greatest thing that you can do is listen to someone else's podcast. A lot of people always wonder, well, what's the best way for me to create my format for my podcast? Well, listen to other people's. See what they say. See how they do it. And some of them you might like, and some of them you might not. You might like, and some of them you might not. It's either way. But again, to each their own. So you just have to be yourself and talk about what you know about, and that's what people will be attracted to you for.
Yeah, and there's obviously several different styles of podcasts, which is why it's a good idea to do what Armand is saying here of listening to other people. There are ones where there's a single host, and that single host just goes out there and talks about whatever they want to talk about for the length of their podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I do that. I mean, in my podcast, that's exactly what I do.
There are other ones where there are co-hosts, and they banter back and forth, talking about whatever they want to talk about. And then there are ones like this one where someone is being interviewed and it's a conversation with a different person each week or every day or whatever the frequency of your podcast is. And there's obviously different lengths too. A podcast could be a few minutes long. It could be an hour long. It totally is up to the person that puts on the podcast. But you're right that when you're first starting, you're just talking to a microphone by yourself or even talking to a camera by yourself, it does feel weird.
Right.
Which is something that you kind of get over pretty quickly, because the fact is that your audience will start to grow and people will start to respond to things. And then you're like, oh, somebody actually is listening to what I'm saying.
Right. Right. Yeah. I was actually at a seminar this past weekend up in Canada. And so someone had come up to me and said, the first words out of their mouth was, hey, the first time I heard about you was through your podcast, which is actually kind of interesting for me. That's usually not the first, point of contact, but this person, that's how they got introduced to me.
Yeah. So some of the things you were saying there make a lot of sense, I think, in terms of, okay, I've got a small business and I'm selling kitchen gadgets, for example.
Sure.
I could do an unboxing video. I could do a demonstration video of
Sure.
these things. All of that makes sense. And I could even maybe interview some of my customers about how they liked a particular product.
Sure.
That all makes sense if I've got a product like that. But what if I've got a business that really isn't very visual? I run a house cleaning service, or I'm an accountant. Then what do I do?
Well, okay, so let's take the accountant first, because that's just the gimme. So the reason I say that is because in accounting, I mean, let's face it, accounting is confusing to everyone. And if you ask 10 accountants the same question, they're all going to give you a different answer. So accounting is just something that's mysterious. People don't know what it is, but you could talk about little things that a person could do to make their accountant's life easier. Number one, number two, you could talk about why they should use an accountant. Number three, you could actually talk about what an accountant actually does, because sometimes people, they think they know what an accountant does. They know, take your shoebox in and do my taxes. That's kind of the typical thing that many people would think about. But an accountant maybe have a different definition, because there's many different kinds of accountants that exist out there. So you could explain to people what an accountant does, how it works, why you should have an accountant as opposed to doing it yourself. Some people prefer to do it themselves. Some people want to have an accountant. What's the best way to go about it? Is there a hybrid model? And there's various things. So an accountant, I think there's that air of mystery that could come into play, which would give them things to say. So, and also let me just kind of put this out there. If you did a podcast a week, which is a fairly good schedule, then if you think about that, that would be 50, let's say roughly 50, let's say you took 2 days off, 50 episodes a week for the year, I mean. So again, coming up with 50 different topics, I think if you brainstormed, you could easily come up with those things. On the other side, let's take that cleaning business as an example. I think a cleaning business, I think, is great because these are tips. My daughter watches YouTube, and one of the shows that she watches on YouTube are these like hacks, and they're usually like life hacks or household hacks, or these different types of things like that, where you can take common household items and make something out of it. Well, it's the same thing with like a cleaning business, right? There are certain things that people would find helpful. And I think that's where you need to think about this, no matter what kind of business that you have, is how can you become helpful to the people that are listening to you. So if you gave people ideas about, for example, how to get gum out of a carpet, how to clean a pet stain so it doesn't hurt their carpet, and get it prepared so it doesn't soak in, for like little emergencies like that, they're a dime a dozen. In fact, what you could do for research is literally go online and you'll find boatloads of websites that gives you all kinds of these hacks. And those are the things that you talk about. It doesn't have to be a long conversation by far, but also throughout any one of these types of businesses, and it doesn't matter what kind of business it is, you're always emphasizing the fact that a person should need you. That you are the answer to their solution. And you don't have to be overt about it. It's not like, and I need you to buy what I have. You don't have to be like that. What you can do is just be out there, because this is not when you're thinking about podcasting, it's not a short-term game. It's a long-term game. And that's what you have to think about. It's always going to be for the long term when it comes to podcasting, because it'd be great. Yes. If I get new clients today, that would be awesome. But the reality is that the longer you do this, the more you get out there, the bigger your audience gets. And so by putting yourself out there consistently via your podcast, then what's going to happen is you're going to build that following, and that's what you're really working on. It's like having your own television show, and that's how I view it, is your own television show, your own radio show, but it's dedicated to whatever it is that you want to talk about for that specific show.
And I think that there's a couple things that you said there that are really key for anyone that happens to be listening today. And that is that give away this information, whether you're doing it in a podcast, doing it in a blog post, doing it in a social media post, you're giving away really valuable information. And you might be thinking, why am I giving that away? You know, how to get gum out of a carpet when I want somebody to hire me to get the gum out of the carpet.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is that when you give this information away, you are building up a rapport with your followers. And when it comes time that they need help, they're going to call the person that they've been following. And it does make a difference. You can give away the information on how to get gum out of a carpet. And when somebody needs that service, they're probably just simply going to pick up the phone and call you. If you have, in fact, been doing what Armand said there and leading people down this path of saying, hey, you need to get my services. You're not doing it in a in-your-face way, but you're doing things like on this podcast. In a minute here, we're going to ask Armand to provide his contact information of, hey, we are able to grow our list and grow our followers by putting this information out there and saying, oh, by the way, if you need to contact me, here's the information. So with that, as we wrap up here, Armand, you want to tell our listeners how they can stay in contact with you?
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I mean, make it really easy for you, and I'll do it something that I know you guys are doing already, and that is listening to a podcast. If you go and you search for my podcast is actually called Marketing University. And if you go there, I give it a strategy. We've been doing it almost daily. And it's a new strategy each and every time about something I've learned. So usually it's something that is just I'm focused on, that's I'm getting the most out of. Like I just recently taught a whole new Facebook strategy. I just recently did a whole new webinar strategy. I just recently did all that. And also throughout those podcasts, what we also do is we tell you about the latest things that we're doing. So that's probably the easiest way. And you could also go to armandmorin.com as well too to find out more about us and what we're doing currently.
Perfect. And I will get those links in the show notes as well. So is there any other last words of advice that you want to share with people today?
Yeah, absolutely. If you have a business, I don't care what you do, the one thing you always want to keep in mind is something very simple. And that is the question that you need to ask yourself at the end of the day is how many people has my business been exposed to? And in one way or another, whether it be people seeing your ads, whether it be people seeing your business coming in through the front door, as an example, walking by your business, seeing an ad that you ran online, saw a post that you may have made on Facebook or social media, or yes, even listening to your podcast. The question is, how many people actually were exposed to you? And then the next question is how many people had an opportunity to purchase what your products or services are? And if you always keep that idea in front of you always and try to expand that number on a regular basis, then it makes your life pretty simple, and it kind of solidifies everything down to a very simple task, is just getting more exposure in one way or another. But always remember that if You can't just let a website just sit. You can't just let your storefront just sit. You have to do something proactive in order to get people to actually come to you. So, sound good?
Absolutely. Awesome information. Really appreciate you being with us today here, my friend. Great to hear from you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me.
You bet. Thanks for listening to today's episode of 20 Minutes of Influence. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please leave a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you are interested in booking myself as a speaker at one of your events or are interested in any of my coaching programs, please visit gregjameson.com.